Sami, could you envision any scenario by which General Haftar could participate in any political agreements or political process going forward?
I think, look, this is going to be difficult for me to say because it's one of those like catch-22 issues. If you put yourself in Khalifa Haftar's position whereby you sided with the internationally recognized government and the Islamist militias in Tripoli rejected that internationally recognized government, the secular parties refused to acknowledge the elections because they didn't win in it. They started telling the world that Libya wasn't ready for democracy. How do you take the other party seriously? The problem with Libya is that every party only accepts democracy insofar as they're the parties that win. I also object to the binary of civil government versus military government. The UAE, it's more than just hegemony over Libya. The UAE quite simply do not trust the Muslim Brotherhood. Take, for example, Saudi's reaction to President Morsi's visit to Tehran. Saudis felt backstabbed. They felt betrayed. They said, why is the Muslim Brotherhood doing this? We gave you a chance. We backed off on the Arab Spring when you won, even though we don't like you. And you've gone and stabbed us in the back by going to Tehran and signing tourism agreements. There is no trust with the Muslim Brotherhoods or the Islamist regimes. And when we're talking about Libya's civil war problem, let's be brutally honest here. The very parties that want Haftar to disarm are the very parties that invited NATO to Libya in the first place. They couldn't get rid of Gaddafi on their own, so they brought NATO to completely destroy Libya and upend the political balance. I'm not saying that Gaddafi was a good man, but the problem with the NATO interference was that it came in, it bombed the daylights out of Libya, and it tried to prop up certain parties that other parties weren't happy with. You had no political accord. There was no leader of this revolution. There was no leadership to guide Libya into a future. All you had was chaos. So now you have a civil war. Suppose Haftar disarms tomorrow. Let's envisage it. Suppose Haftar tomorrow says, you know what, guys, I'm sorry, I'm going to disarm. How do you deal with the conflicting factions in Tripoli? How do you deal with Zintan? How do you deal with Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi who wants to come forward to the elections? The problem is not only Haftar, even though he is a disastrous problem. The problem is with all of the Libyan factions who quite simply cannot look at each other and sit at a table and say, you know what, I recognize you as Libyan. The Muslim Brotherhood wants Libya, Haftar wants Libya, Saif al-Islam Gaddafi wants Libya, and the biggest issue is this: the US doesn't know who to support. The US is baffled, France is baffled, Italy is baffled, UK is baffled. For France and the UK, this was supposed to be a straightforward operation. We go in, we remove Gaddafi, we get the contracts, and we rebuild Libya. For the US, it was supposed to be straightforward. We get rid of Gaddafi, we establish hegemony in Libya, and we prevent the spread of terrorism. But now it's all over the place, because now you have Qatar and Turkey on one hand, and then you have UAE and Egypt on the other hand, and both lobbying Washington, lobbying Paris, lobbying London for international support. This is the reason why I say we should be wary how we skew the narrative. Even if you got rid of UAE and Egypt, and I believe they are a disastrous influence on Libya, I will say it. I believe they are a disastrous influence on Libya. If you remove them, it does not remove the core issue here, which is how do you reconcile NATO interference in Libya? How do you reconcile the fact that nobody really wants elections? And how do you reconcile trying to bring a power that can actually bring peace to Libya? Moreover, and on this last point before I hand over so I don't speak for too long, how do you reconcile these tribes who bore the brunt of the revenge of many of these militias who rose up against Gaddafi? Beni Walid will never forget the blockade that was done to them. Watfalla will never forget the damage that was done to them in the revenge attacks. All of these innocent people who simply followed the wave, which is the Gaddafi wave, were punished and brutally punished. Libya needs a very serious national reconciliation, and they could take great lessons from South Africa and Mandela's Amnesty Commission instead of going in and taking revenge and passing a law banning every Gaddafi-era politician and torturing and abusing former prime ministers like Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi.